The blood soaking through the makeshift bandage wrapped around her shoulder told Quinton O'Brien everything he needed to know about the woman crouched behind the boulder. She was hurt badly, and she was trying to survive alone. He had been tracking elk through the rugged terrain 15 miles outside Leavenworth, Kansas, when he heard the gunshots echo across the canyon. That had been 2 hours ago, and now, as the September sun of 1873 climbed higher in the sky, he found her attempting to tie off a strip of her own torn petticoat with her teeth, her face pale and dotted with sweat. She hadn't noticed him yet, too focused on the task of keeping herself alive, and Quinton took a moment to assess the situation. Her horse lay dead 30 feet away, and the tracks in the dust told a story of pursuit, violence, and desperate flight. "Madam, that needs proper tending," he said quietly, not wanting to startle her too badly. Her head snapped up, and despite her obvious pain, her hand flew to the revolver at her hip. Green eyes met his through tangled auburn hair, and he saw fear there, but also a fierce determination that struck something deep in his chest. "Stay back," she warned, though her voice shook. "I mean it." Quinton raised both hands slowly, his rifle still slung across his broad back. He stood 6 feet 4 inches tall, with shoulders built from years of hauling traps and game through mountain passes, his dark hair hanging past his collar, tied back with a leather cord. He knew he looked intimidating, especially to a wounded woman alone in the wilderness. "I am not here to hurt you," he said, keeping his voice steady and calm. "But that shoulder wound is going to kill you if it is not cleaned and stitched proper. Let me help." "I can manage," she said through gritted teeth, but even as she spoke, fresh blood seeped through the fabric she had pressed against the wound. "You are losing too much blood." Quinton took a careful step forward. "My camp is a mile west. I have medical supplies, clean water, and a fire. Whatever happened to you, whoever did this, they are long gone now. The tracks head south, been gone at least an hour." She studied him for a long moment, and he could see her weighing her options. Finally, her shoulders sagged slightly. "Why would you help me?" "Because it is the right thing to do," he answered simply. "And because I would not leave any creature to suffer if I could prevent it." The revolver lowered slightly. "Adelaide Denton," she said. "And yes, I need help. I tried, but I cannot reach the wound properly." Quinton moved closer, kneeling beside her with practiced ease. Up close, he could see she was young, perhaps 22 or 23, with delicate features that were currently twisted in pain. The bullet had torn through the meat of her shoulder, a through-and-through wound that was bleeding freely. "Quinton O'Brien," he introduced himself as he shrugged off his pack. "This is going to hurt, Miss Denton. I will not lie to you about that." "Everything already hurts," she said with a weak attempt at humor. "What is a little more?" He worked quickly, first cutting away the bloody fabric of her dress to expose the wound. She hissed in pain but did not pull away. From his pack, he retrieved a leather roll containing needles, thread, and small bottles of whiskey and carbolic acid supplies he always carried since a man alone in the wilderness needed to be prepared for anything. "Drink this first," he said, offering her the whiskey bottle. "It will help with the pain." Adelaide took a long swallow, coughing slightly at the burn. "I have never been much of a drinker. Today might be a good day to start." Quinton poured the carbolic acid over the wound, and she bit down on her lower lip hard enough to draw blood, but she did not cry out. He found himself impressed by her fortitude. As he worked, threading the needle with practiced hands, he asked, "Who shot you?" "3 men," Adelaide said, her words coming faster as if talking helped distract her from the pain. "They attacked the wagon I was traveling in with my uncle. We were coming from Independence, heading to Leavenworth where my uncle planned to set up a new mercantile." They wanted the money we carried for the business. My uncle told me to run, so I took a horse and rode. I heard more shots behind me, but I did not stop. Quinton's jaw tightened as he began stitching the exit wound. Your uncle! I do not know if he survived. Her voice cracked. I could not go back. He told me to ride for Leavenworth to find the marshal. The nearest settlement is a hard ride from here, and you are in no condition to make it alone. Quinton finished the back wound and moved to the entry point. My camp has shelter. You can rest there tonight, and tomorrow I will take you to town myself. You would do that. You do not even know me. He met her eyes as he worked. I know you are hurt and alone. That is enough. Adelaide was silent for a moment, watching his large, calloused hands move with surprising gentleness as he stitched her torn flesh. You are very skilled at this. A man learns many things living in the mountains, Quinton said. I have patched up my share of wounds, both my own and others. You live up here alone, mostly. I trap, hunt, trade furs in town when I need supplies. It is a solitary life, but I prefer it that way. He tied off the final stitch and reached for a clean bandage from his pack. Or I did anyway. What changed? Adelaide asked, then gasped as he wrapped the bandage snugly around her shoulder. Nothing yet, he said quietly, but I have a feeling things are about to get complicated. He helped her to her feet and she swayed slightly. Without hesitation, Quinton swept her up into his arms, cradling her against his chest as if she weighed nothing at all. I can walk, Adelaide protested weakly. You can barely stand, he countered. Save your strength. My camp is not far. She did not argue further, and as he carried her through the pine forest, she found herself studying his profile. He had a strong jaw covered in dark stubble, and his eyes were a deep brown that seemed to miss nothing. Despite the situation, she felt oddly safe in his arms, as if nothing could harm her while he held her. Quinton's camp was simple but well organized, a canvas lean-to stretched between two trees, a stone fire ring with an iron grate, and supplies stored in oilcloth-wrapped bundles hung from high branches to keep them away from animals. He set Adelaide down gently on a bedroll near the fire pit, then set about building up the flames. I have coffee, dried venison, and some hard biscuits, he said. Not fancy, but it will keep your strength up. Anything sounds wonderful right now, Adelaide admitted. The whiskey and the shock were catching up with her, making everything feel slightly unreal. As Quinton prepared the simple meal, she found herself studying him more closely. His buckskin shirt stretched across impossibly broad shoulders, and when he reached up to hang the coffee pot over the fire, she could see the play of muscles in his arms and back. He moved with the confident grace of a predator, each motion economical and purposeful. Everything about him spoke of strength and capability, and Adelaide felt something stir in her chest that had nothing to do with her injury. Here, Quinton said, offering her a tin cup of steaming coffee and a plate with jerky and biscuits. Eat slowly. Adelaide took the food gratefully, suddenly ravenous. As she ate, Quinton settled across the fire from her, his own plate balanced on his knee. Tell me about your uncle, he said. What was his name? Marcus Denton. He was my father's brother. Adelaide stared into the fire. My parents died from cholera 3 years ago, and Uncle Marcus took me in. He had been living in Independence, but he said Kansas was full of opportunity. We sold everything to finance this trip and the new store. Her voice broke. If he is dead, it is all for nothing. Do not assume the worst yet, Quinton said firmly. Men are tougher than they look sometimes, and if those bandits wanted money, they might have taken it and left him alive. You really think so? I think hope is worth holding on to until you know otherwise. He set down his empty plate. Tomorrow, we will ride to Leavenworth. The marshal there is a good man, John Carmichael. He will organize a search party and send men to look for your uncle and the wagon." Adelaide nodded, fighting back tears. The events of the day were overwhelming and exhaustion was pulling at her. Quinton noticed her eyelids drooping. "You need rest," he said, standing and moving to add more wood to the fire. "Take the bedroll. I will keep watch." "Where will you sleep?" "I will be fine. I have slept sitting up against trees more times than I can count." He retrieved a thick woolen blanket from his supplies and draped it over her. "Sleep, Miss Denton. You are safe here." Adelaide wanted to protest, but the warmth of the fire and the blanket, combined with her body's desperate need to heal, pulled her under into sleep before she could form the words. Quinton watched her sleep, his mind working through the implications of what he had found today. 3 armed men attacking travelers for money was not uncommon in these parts, but something about the whole situation bothered him. The tracks he had seen were methodical, professional almost. These were not desperate men making a panicked grab for cash. They had planned this. He stood and walked to the edge of his camp, looking out over the darkening forest. The sounds of night creatures filled the air, familiar and somehow comforting. He had lived alone for 5 years now, ever since he had left his family's failing farm in Illinois and headed west. The solitude had suited him, given him peace after watching his parents work themselves to death trying to squeeze life from barren soil. But now, with Adelaide Denton sleeping by his fire, something had shifted. He could not name it exactly, but he felt it in his chest, a tightening that was not entirely uncomfortable. She had looked at him with those green eyes, full of pain and fear and desperate hope, and something in him had responded with a primal need to protect, to heal, to keep her safe from all harm. He shook his head at his own thoughts. She was a woman in need of help, nothing more. Tomorrow he would deliver her safely to town, help her find her uncle if possible, and then return to his mountains and his solitary life. Even as he thought it, Quinton knew he was lying to himself. The next morning dawned clear and cool, with mist rising from the forest floor. Adelaide woke to find Quinton already up, checking her bandages with gentle efficiency. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Sore," she admitted, "but better than yesterday. You did good work. The stitches are holding and I do not see any signs of infection yet. That is good." He handed her more coffee and some pan bread he had cooked over the fire. "We should leave soon if you feel strong enough to ride. It is about a 3-hour journey to Leavenworth on horseback." "I can manage," Adelaide said, though in truth she was not entirely certain. Her shoulder throbbed with every movement and she felt weak from blood loss. Quinton seemed to read her thoughts. "You will ride with me. My horse can carry us both easily, and it will keep you from having to control a mount on your own." "That seems like an imposition." "It is practical," he said firmly. "Besides, Thunder is used to carrying heavy loads. One small woman will not trouble him at all." Adelaide bristled slightly at being called small, though compared to Quinton's bulk she supposed she was. "Very well. But I insist on compensating you for your help once we reach town." "We will discuss that later," Quinton said, clearly not interested in arguing about money. He began breaking down his camp with practiced efficiency, packing everything into neat bundles that he secured to his horse's saddle. Thunder was a massive gelding, dark gray with a black mane and intelligent eyes. He stood at least 17 hands high, and Adelaide felt a moment of trepidation as Quinton lifted her onto the saddle as if she weighed nothing at all. "Hold onto the saddle horn," he instructed, then swung up behind her with easy grace. His arms came around her to take the reins, and Adelaide found herself enclosed in the circle of his embrace, her back against his broad chest. She could feel the heat of him through their clothes, solid and reassuring. "Comfortable?" Quinton asked, his voice close to her ear. "Yes," Adelaide managed, though comfortable was not quite the right word for the strange flutter in her stomach at his nearness. They set off at a steady pace, thunder moving smoothly beneath them. Quinton kept one arm around Adelaide's waist to steady her, and she found herself leaning back against him, trusting him to keep her safe. As they rode, Quinton pointed out landmarks: a creek where he often fished, a meadow where elk gathered in the mornings, a rocky outcropping that looked like a sleeping giant. His voice was deep and calm, and Adelaide found herself relaxing despite her pain and worry. "You know this land well," she observed. "I have roamed these mountains for 5 years now. You learn every tree and stone when your life depends on it." Quinton adjusted their path to avoid a steep slope. "What about you? What brought you to Kansas besides your uncle's business venture?" Adelaide hesitated, then decided honesty was easier than evasion. "There was nothing left for me in Pennsylvania. After my parents died, I lived with my uncle, but his wife never truly welcomed me. She saw me as an extra mouth to feed, another expense. When Uncle Marcus decided to move west and start fresh, he offered to take me with him. I jumped at the chance." "No suitors back east?" Quinton asked, then immediately seemed to regret the question. "Forgive me, that was too personal." "No, it is all right," Adelaide said. "There was one man, a banker's son. He courted me for a few months, but when my parents died and I had no inheritance, his interest disappeared remarkably quickly. I learned something valuable from that experience." "What was that?" "That I would rather be alone than be with someone who sees me as a transaction rather than a person." Quinton was quiet for a moment, then said, "That is a hard lesson but a wise one." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, and Adelaide found her thoughts drifting. Despite the circumstances, or perhaps because of them, she felt more alive than she had in years. There was something about Quinton O'Brien that made her feel seen, valued in a way she had not experienced before. He had asked nothing of her, expected nothing, yet he had saved her life and was now going out of his way to help her further. "Why do you live alone in the mountains?" she asked suddenly. "You seem like a man who would do well anywhere. You could have a farm, a business, a family." "I did have a farm once, or my family did," Quinton said. "My parents worked themselves to death trying to make it profitable. I watched them age 20 years in the space of 5, watched the land take everything from them and give nothing back. When they died within months of each other, I sold what little remained and headed west. I swore I would never put down roots like that again, never let myself be tied to one place that could bleed me dry. So you chose a different kind of hard life instead. Perhaps. But it is mine on my own terms. I answer to no one, depend on no one." He paused. "At least that was the idea." "And now," Adelaide prompted, "now I am not so certain it is as fulfilling as I once thought." Adelaide felt her heart beat faster at his words, but before she could respond, they crested a hill and Leavenworth came into view below them, sprawled along the Missouri River. The town had grown considerably in recent years, with new buildings spreading outward from the original settlement near Fort Leavenworth. "We will go straight to the marshal's office," Quinton said. "He will want to hear about the attack and organize a search party for your uncle." "Thank you," Adelaide said softly, "for everything." Quinton's arm tightened slightly around her waist, a brief squeeze that spoke volumes. "You do not need to thank me." They rode into town, drawing curious stares from the people on the streets. Quinton guided Thunder to a stop in front of a wooden building with a sign that read "Marshal," and helped Adelaide down carefully before dismounting himself. Marshal John Carmichael was a weathered man in his 50s with sharp blue eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He listened intently as Adelaide recounted the attack, asking pointed questions about the number of men, their appearance, and the location of the ambush. "I will get a posse together within the hour," Carmichael said when she finished. "Quinton, you know that territory better than anyone. Will you guide us?" "Of course," Quinton agreed without hesitation. "But first, Miss Denton needs proper medical attention and a safe place to stay." "The doctor's office is 2 streets over," the marshal said, "and Mrs. Henderson runs a respectable boarding house on Main Street. She will take good care of you, miss." "I will take her to the doctor first," Quinton said firmly. "Then the boarding house. After that I will return to help with the search." Adelaide wanted to protest that she could manage on her own, but the truth was she felt lightheaded and weak. She nodded gratefully instead. Dr. Samuel Porter was a kind man with gentle hands who examined Adelaide's shoulder with professional interest. "Whoever stitched this did excellent work," he said, glancing at Quinton with approval. "Clean, even stitches, proper spacing. You have done this before." "A few times," Quinton admitted. "Well, you likely saved her life. The wound is clean, no signs of infection. Keep it bandaged and dry, change the dressing twice daily with carbolic solution, and she should heal well." The doctor prepared a packet of bandages and a bottle of laudanum for pain. "Come back in a week so I can check on your progress." From there, Quinton walked Adelaide to Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, carrying her small bag that had been salvaged from her horse. The landlady was a plump, motherly woman who clucked sympathetically over Adelaide's injury and immediately showed her to a clean, simple room on the 2nd floor. "You rest now, dear," Mrs. Henderson said. "I will bring up some soup and bread shortly." When they were alone, Adelaide turned to Quinton. "You will find him, won't you, my uncle?" "I will do everything in my power to bring him back alive," Quinton promised. "But you need to prepare yourself for any outcome." "I know." Adelaide reached out and took his hand, surprising them both. "Please be careful. Those men are dangerous." Quinton looked down at their joined hands, her small fingers pale against his sun-darkened skin. "I will return as soon as I can." "I will be waiting," Adelaide said, and meant it with an intensity that startled her. Quinton squeezed her hand gently, then released it and left before he could do something foolish like pull her into his arms. He had known this woman for barely 24 hours, yet the thought of riding away from her made his chest ache in a way he did not fully understand. The posse consisted of Marshal Carmichael, his deputy Pete Rogers, 4 armed townsmen, and Quinton. They rode hard back toward the mountains, following the directions Adelaide had provided. Quinton led them off the main trail to where he had found her, and from there they backtracked along the path her horse had taken. It was late afternoon when they found the wagon, overturned in a ravine with its contents scattered across the ground. One man lay dead nearby, shot through the chest. Quinton recognized the description Adelaide had given of her uncle. This was not him. "Must have been a driver or guard," Marshal Carmichael said, kneeling beside the body. "Been dead since yesterday." They searched the area carefully and found tracks leading away from the wagon 4 horses, 3 riding double and 1 carrying heavy packs. The bandits had taken their loot and fled south, just as Quinton had predicted. "No sign of another body," Deputy Rogers called out from where he had been searching the brush. "If her uncle was here, they either took him or he got away." "Spread out," Carmichael ordered. "Look for any sign of where he might have gone." It was Quinton who found the trail, subtle but their broken branches, disturbed leaves, a partial boot print in soft earth. Someone had fled on foot, heading east toward a rocky area where tracks would be harder to follow. "Here," he called to the others. They followed the trail for nearly an hour before Quinton heard a faint groan coming from a cluster of large boulders. He dismounted quickly, moving toward the sound with his rifle ready. Marcus Denton was wedged between two rocks, his leg bent at an unnatural angle, his face gray with pain and dehydration. But he was alive. "Adelaide," he croaked when he saw them. "My niece, She is safe in town," Quinton said quickly, kneeling beside the injured man. "She made it to Leavenworth. I found her and brought her to safety." Marcus's eyes filled with tears of relief. "Thank God. I told her to run. I could not follow. My leg, it is broken," Quinton said, examining the limb carefully. "We need to splint it before we move you." Working together, Quinton and the marshal fashioned a splint from branches and rope, then carefully lifted Marcus onto a makeshift stretcher. The injured man bit back screams of pain, but Quinton moved as gently as possible. "The men who did this," Marcus said through gritted teeth as they began the slow journey back to town. "There were 3 of them. They knew about the money. They knew exactly where to find us." "Someone talked," Carmichael said grimly. "Someone in Independence knew your plans and sold you out." "A man named Garrett," Marcus said. "He worked at the land office where I filed my business papers. He asked a lot of questions about my finances, seemed very interested in how much capital I had. I thought he was just being friendly." "We will send word to the marshal in Independence," Carmichael said. "But for now, let us get you back to town and to the doctor." It was well after dark when they rode back into Leavenworth. Quinton went directly to Mrs. Henderson's boarding house while the others took Marcus to the doctor's office. Adelaide was sitting in the parlor when Quinton entered, and she jumped to her feet the moment she saw him, wincing at the sudden movement. "Your uncle is alive," Quinton said immediately, and watched the color flood back into her face. "His leg is broken badly, but Dr. Porter is tending to him now. He should recover fully with time." Adelaide swayed, and Quinton moved quickly to steady her, his hands on her arms. "He is alive," she whispered. "Thank God, thank you." "He is a tough man," Quinton said. "He hid in the rocks for more than a day with a broken leg waiting for help. That takes courage. Can I see him? The doctor will want to set the leg first and get him settled. But tomorrow, yes." Quinton found he did not want to let go of her, did not want to step back. "How are you feeling? Is the pain manageable?" "I am much better now," Adelaide said, and she was looking at him with such warmth, such gratitude, and something more that Quinton felt his carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. "I should go," he said, though he made no move to leave. "You need rest." "Stay," Adelaide said impulsively. "Just for a little while. Mrs. Henderson has already gone to bed, but there is tea in the kitchen. I would like the company if you do not mind." Quinton knew he should refuse, should put distance between himself and this woman who was making him feel things he had sworn off years ago. Instead, he heard himself say, "All right, just for a little while." They sat in the boarding house kitchen, drinking tea and talking quietly. Adelaide told him about her childhood in Pennsylvania, about her mother's flower garden and her father's terrible jokes. Quinton shared stories of his early days in the mountains, of near misses with bears and the harsh winter he had spent snowed in for 3 months. "Were you not lonely?" Adelaide asked. "Sometimes," Quinton admitted, "but I thought loneliness was preferable to disappointment." "People always let you down eventually." "Not always," Adelaide said softly. "You have not let me down. I have known you less than 2 days, and yet you have shown me more kindness and reliability in that time than some people have shown me in years." Adelaide set down her teacup and met his eyes directly. "You saved my life, Quinton. You asked for nothing in return, expected nothing. You simply helped because it was the right thing to do. That speaks to the kind of man you are." Quinton felt something crack open in his chest, a long frozen place that was suddenly flooded with warmth. "Adelaide, I know this is fast," she interrupted. "I know we barely know each other, but I also know that I have never felt as safe, as seen, as I do when I am with you. And I think maybe you feel something too." He should deny it. He should stand up, walk out, return to his mountains and his solitary life. Instead, Quinton reached across the table and took her hand in his much larger one. "I feel it," he admitted quietly. "From the moment I saw you trying to bandage your own wounds, so brave and determined to survive, something in me recognized something in you. I have been telling myself it is just concern for someone in need, but that is a lie." "Then what is it?" Adelaide asked, her heart hammering in her chest. "I think it might be the beginning of something I have been running from for a very long time," Quinton said. "Something that terrifies me almost as much as it draws me in." Adelaide stood, and Quinton rose with her. They were standing very close now, and she could see the conflict in his dark eyes, the war between what he wanted and what he feared. "You do not have to be afraid," she said. "Not with me." Quinton lifted his free hand slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her cheek with surprising gentleness. "I am not afraid of you. I am afraid of how much I want to stay." "Then stay," Adelaide whispered. He kissed her then, soft and careful, mindful of her injury. It was a kiss that held a promise, a question, and an answer all at once. Adelaide's good arm came up to rest against his chest, feeling his heart pound beneath her palm, as strong and steady as the man himself. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Quinton rested his forehead against hers. "I should go," he said again, but this time it sounded like a regret rather than a decision. "I know," Adelaide said, "but you will come back tomorrow. Wild horses could not keep me away." Quinton left reluctantly, and Adelaide climbed the stairs to her room feeling as if she were floating. Her shoulder ached, and her uncle was injured, and their entire future was uncertain, but none of that seemed to matter in the face of what had just happened. She touched her lips, still feeling the warmth of his kiss, and smiled. The next few weeks passed in a blur of healing and planning. Marcus Denton's leg would take months to fully mend, but his spirits were high now that he had been reunited with his niece. The bandits who had attacked them were never caught. They had fled into Indian territory, where the law could not easily follow, but Marshal Carmichael managed to recover about half of their stolen money, which had been cached near the attack site. It was enough to get the mercantile started, though on a smaller scale than originally planned. Marcus purchased a modest building on Main Street and began stocking it with goods ordered from St. Louis and Kansas City. Adelaide threw herself into helping him, managing the books and dealing with customers while her uncle directed operations from a chair, his leg propped up. Through it all, Quinton was a constant presence. He came to town almost every day, bringing fresh game for the boarding house kitchen, helping move heavy crates for the store, sitting with Marcus to keep him company while Adelaide ran errands. The whole town began to notice the way the solitary mountain man's eyes followed Adelaide Denton, the way his face softened when she entered a room. "That man is head over heels for you," Mrs. Henderson said one afternoon as she and Adelaide were preparing vegetables for supper. "And you are just as smitten with him from what I can see." Adelaide felt her cheeks warm. "Is it that obvious, dear child? The two of you look at each other like you are the only people in the world. It is quite romantic, actually." The older woman smiled. "Quinton O'Brien has lived like a hermit for years, and now he is in town more than he is in the mountains. That is the power of love if I have ever seen it." "We have not spoken of love," Adelaide said, though her heart leaped at the word. "Perhaps you should. Life is too short and too uncertain to waste time dancing around what you really feel." That evening, when Quinton came to walk Adelaide back from the store to the boarding house, as had become his habit, she decided to take Mrs. Henderson's advice. They strolled slowly through the warm October twilight, and Adelaide gathered her courage. "Quinton, I need to ask you something." "Anything," he said immediately. "What happens when my uncle is fully healed and the store is running smoothly? What happens to us?" Quinton stopped walking and turned to face her. They were standing beneath a large oak tree at the edge of town, and in the fading light, his face was serious. "I have been thinking about that a great deal," he admitted. "Adelaide, I came west to escape putting down roots, to avoid the kind of ties that bind a man to one place. But these past weeks with you have shown me that I was not actually avoiding pain or disappointment. I was just avoiding living." "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I do not want to go back to my solitary life in the mountains. I want to be where you are. I want to wake up every morning knowing I will see you, hear your voice, make you smile." He took both her hands in his. "I am saying that I love you, Adelaide Denton. I have loved you since that first day when you looked at me with such fierce determination, despite your fear and pain. You are the bravest, strongest, most remarkable woman I have ever met, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it." Adelaide felt tears spill down her cheeks, but they were tears of joy. "I love you too. I think I started loving you when you carried me through the forest to your camp, when you held me like I was something precious worth protecting. You make me feel safe and valued and seen in a way I have never experienced before." Quinton pulled her close, mindful of her still healing shoulder, and kissed her with all the pent-up emotion of the past weeks. This kiss was different from their first, deeper, more certain, full of promise and passion. When they finally broke apart, Adelaide was breathless. "So what do we do now?" "Now I ask your uncle for permission to court you properly," Quinton said. "And then, when enough time has passed that no one can say we rushed into things, I intend to ask you to marry me." "And if I do not want to wait?" Adelaide asked with a smile. "Then we will compromise," Quinton said, grinning. "I will court you for a respectable amount of time, and you will practice being patient." "I have never been very good at patience." "I had noticed," Quinton said, and kissed her again. True to his word, Quinton spoke to Marcus Denton that very evening. The older man, who had been watching the growing attachment between his niece and the mountain man with approval, gave his blessing readily. "You saved both our lives," Marcus said, gripping Quinton's hand firmly. "And more than that, you have proven yourself to be a man of honor and integrity." Adelaide could not choose better. "I will spend my life making sure she never regrets choosing me," Quinton promised. Over the following months, Quinton began the process of transforming his life. He sold most of his trapping equipment and used the money to purchase a small plot of land just outside Leavenworth. With help from men he hired in town, he began building a house, not a grand mansion, but a solid, well-constructed home with a large kitchen, a spacious parlor, and bedrooms enough for a growing family. Adelaide visited the building site often, offering suggestions and helping where she could. She watched Quinton work shirtless in the summer heat, muscles rippling as he lifted beams and hammered nails, and felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the weather. "You are staring again," Quinton said with amusement, catching her watching him. "Can you blame me?" Adelaide retorted. "You are quite a sight." He climbed down from the roof frame and pulled her close despite being covered in sawdust and sweat. "You are quite a sight yourself. I cannot believe I get to spend the rest of my life with you." "You have not actually asked me yet," Adelaide pointed out playfully. "All in good time," Quinton said mysteriously. "I want to do this right." The proposal came on a crisp November evening. Quinton had invited Adelaide to see the completed house, and she walked through the rooms with delight, admiring the craftsmanship and care evident in every detail. "It is beautiful," she said, running her hand along the smooth wooden banister of the staircase. You built this with your own hands." "I built it for you," Quinton said. "For us. Every nail, every board placed with thoughts of the life we will build together." He led her to the empty parlor, where he had laid a blanket on the floor and set out a simple meal: bread, cheese, wine, and the first apples of the season. "A picnic in our own home," Adelaide said, delighted. They ate and talked, and as the sun set through the western windows, painting the room in gold and orange light, Quinton stood and pulled Adelaide to her feet. "There is one more thing this house needs before it is truly complete," he said. "What is that?" Quinton knelt on one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple gold band set with a small but beautiful emerald. "Adelaide Denton, you came into my life when I had convinced myself I was content with solitude. You showed me that I was not living, just existing. You brought light and warmth and purpose back into my world. You are brave and kind and strong, and I love you more than I ever thought it possible to love another person." His voice was thick with emotion. "Will you marry me? Will you make this house a home and let me spend the rest of my days trying to make you as happy as you have made me?" Adelaide dropped to her knees in front of him, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Quinton slipped the ring onto her finger, and then they were kissing and laughing and crying all at once, wrapped in each other's arms as the last light of day faded around them. They were married in the spring of 1874, in a simple ceremony at the small church in Leavenworth. Adelaide wore a dress of pale blue silk that she and Mrs. Henderson had sewn together, and Quinton wore a new suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. Marcus walked his niece down the aisle, his leg fully healed though he still carried a cane. The whole town turned out for the wedding, for Quinton and Adelaide had become beloved figures: the mountain man who had given up his solitary ways for love, and the brave young woman who had survived an attack and built a new life from the ashes. As they exchanged vows, Adelaide looked into Quinton's dark eyes and saw her entire future reflected there: a future of love and partnership, of challenges faced together, of a life built on mutual respect and deep affection. "I love you," she whispered as he slipped the wedding band onto her finger alongside the engagement ring. "I love you," Quinton replied, his voice carrying to every corner of the small church. Today and always. Their first year of marriage was one of adjustment and joy. Quinton worked alongside Marcus in the mercantile during the winter months, learning the business and helping it grow. When spring came, he still ventured into the mountains, but now only for short trips to hunt and trap, always eager to return home to Adelaide. Adelaide proved to be a natural businesswoman, with a head for figures and an ability to negotiate with suppliers that impressed even the most hardened traders. Under her management, Denton Mercantile thrived, becoming one of the most successful businesses in Leavenworth. But more than business success, their marriage was marked by deep companionship. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, worked side by side in the garden Adelaide planted behind their house, and spent evenings reading aloud to each other by the fire. Quinton taught Adelaide to shoot and track, and she taught him to appreciate poetry and music. In the fall of 1875, Adelaide discovered she was expecting their first child. Quinton was beside himself with joy and worry, becoming even more protective of her than usual. "I am not made of glass," Adelaide protested when he tried to stop her from lifting a crate at the store. "You are carrying our child," Quinton said firmly. "I will do the heavy lifting from now on. I am barely showing yet. I am perfectly capable, Adelaide." He took her hands gently. "Please. Let me take care of you. Let me protect you both." She softened at the vulnerability in his voice. "All right, but only because I love you, not because I need protecting." "I know," Quinton said, kissing her forehead. "You are the strongest person I know." But even the strong deserve to be cared for sometimes. Their son was born in May of 1876, arriving on a warm spring morning with a lusty cry that announced his presence to the world. Quinton held the baby with shaking hands, awed by the tiny perfect features, the small fingers that gripped his thumb with surprising strength. "What should we name him?" Adelaide asked, exhausted but radiant. "What about Samuel, after the doctor who helped you when you were wounded?" Quinton suggested. "Sam O'Brien. It has a good sound to it." "Samuel Marcus O'Brien," Adelaide said. "After the doctor and my uncle both." "Perfect," Quinton agreed. Marcus was delighted to have his great-nephew named after him, and he doted on the baby shamelessly. The old mercantile owner had found a new lease on life in Leavenworth, and he showed no signs of slowing down despite being in his 60s. As Sam grew from baby to toddler, he showed signs of having inherited both his father's strength and his mother's quick mind. He was walking before he was 10 months old and speaking in full sentences by 18 months. Quinton taught him to ride almost as soon as he could walk, sitting the boy in front of him on Thunder's back and walking the old horse in gentle circles around the yard. "He is a natural," Quinton said proudly, watching Sam giggle with delight as the horse moved beneath him. "He has a good teacher," Adelaide said, leaning against the fence and watching her two favorite people in the world. In 1878, their daughter arrived, a tiny girl with her mother's green eyes and auburn hair. They named her Rose, and from the moment she drew breath, she had her father wrapped around her little finger. "I cannot believe I survived the wilderness for years, faced down bears and blizzards and bandits," Quinton said, holding the sleeping infant. "And this tiny creature has reduced me to absolute terror that I might do something wrong." Adelaide laughed softly. "You are doing perfectly." She knows she is loved. As the children grew, so did the O'Brien families standing in the community. Quinton served on the town council, using his knowledge of the surrounding wilderness to help plan new roads and settlements. Adelaide expanded the mercantile, adding a section for books and another for farming equipment. But despite their success and growing responsibilities, Quinton and Adelaide always made time for each other. They still took long walks in the evenings, now with children running ahead of them. They still sat by the fire talking after the little ones were in bed, sharing their dreams and fears and daily joys. "You ever miss it?" Adelaide asked one night as they sat on the porch, watching fireflies dance in the summer darkness. "The solitary life in the mountains." Quinton was quiet for a moment, then pulled her closer against his side. "No, not for a single second. That life was not really living, Adelaide. It was just existing, waiting. I did not even know what I was waiting for until I found you bleeding and brave behind that boulder." "I was terrified," Adelaide admitted. "You were magnificent," Quinton corrected. "You still are. Every day you amaze me with your strength, your kindness, your ability to build something beautiful from whatever life gives you." "We built it together," Adelaide said. "Everything we have, everything we are, we created as partners. The best decision I ever made was stopping to help a wounded woman who was too stubborn to die," Quinton said with a smile in his voice. "The best decision I ever made was trusting a mountain man with gentle hands and a protective heart," Adelaide replied. They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. From inside the house came the sound of Sam practicing his reading, stumbling over the words but persisting with determination. Rose's laughter echoed from upstairs where Marcus was telling her a bedtime story. In 1882, Marcus Denton passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 68. He left the mercantile to Adelaide and Quinton, along with a letter expressing his pride in all they had accomplished and his gratitude for the years of joy they had given him. "He was the only family I had for so long," Adelaide said through her tears at the funeral. "He saved me when I had nowhere else to go." "He loved you very much," Quinton said, holding her close. "And he died knowing you were happy and cared for. That is all any parent or guardian can hope for." With Marcus's passing, Adelaide and Quinton became the full owners of what was now called O'Brien Mercantile. They expanded again, building a second story onto the building and hiring additional staff to manage the growing business. Sam, now 6 years old, showed an interest in learning everything about the store, following his parents around and asking endless questions. Rose, at 4, was more interested in the bolts of colorful fabric and the jars of penny candy. Life settled into a rhythm of family, business, and community involvement. Quinton still took occasional trips into the mountains, but now they were family outings, teaching Sam to track and hunt and showing Rose the beauty of the wilderness. Adelaide would pack elaborate picnics, and they would spend whole days exploring the forests and streams. "This is where I found your mother," Quinton told Sam one day when the boy was 10, pointing to the boulder where Adelaide had been hiding. "She was hurt and alone, but she was fighting to survive with everything she had." Sam looked at the boulder with new interest. "Were you scared, Mama?" "Terrified," Adelaide admitted. "But then your father appeared, and somehow I knew I would be all right." "How did you know?" Rose asked, now 8 and intensely interested in love stories. "Because he looked at me like I mattered," Adelaide said simply. "Like I was worth saving, worth protecting, worth caring for, and he has looked at me that way every day since." Quinton reached over and took her hand, bringing it to his lips. "Because you are worth all of that and more." In 1885, Adelaide discovered she was pregnant again, much to everyone's surprise. Sam was now 9 and Rose was 7, and they had assumed their family was complete. "Apparently life had other plans," Adelaide said wryly, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. Quinton was delighted, though worried about Adelaide's health since she was now 34. But she sailed through the pregnancy with even more energy than before, and in early 1886 twin boys arrived, red-faced and squalling. "2 more O'Briens," Quinton said in wonder, holding one in each arm. "Our family just doubled in size." They named the twins Thomas and James, and the house that had once seemed so spacious suddenly felt comfortably full. Sam stepped easily into the role of big brother, helping watch over the babies with serious dedication. Rose treated them like living dolls, constantly wanting to hold and cuddle them. As the years passed, the O'Brien family became a cornerstone of Leavenworth society. Sam grew into a tall, strong young man much like his father, with a gift for working with his hands. He eventually took over much of the physical labor of running the mercantile and the family's small ranch. Rose became a teacher, opening a small school for the children of families who lived too far from town to attend regular classes. Thomas and James, the twins, were inseparable and mischievous, keeping Adelaide and Quinton on their toes through their childhood and teenage years. One became a lawyer and the other a doctor, both staying in Leavenworth to serve the community. Through it all, Quinton and Adelaide's love remained the foundation of everything. They grew older together, Quinton's dark hair turning silver, Adelaide's auburn locks fading to a softer shade. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the wounded woman and the mountain man who had found each other against all odds. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1899, their children and grandchildren Sam had married and had 3 children of his own, by then threw them a celebration at the mercantile. The whole town attended, For Quinton and Adelaide O'Brien were beloved figures who had contributed so much to Leavenworth's growth and prosperity. As the party wound down and the guests began to leave, Quinton pulled Adelaide aside to the same spot where he had proposed so many years ago. The house had been expanded over the years, with additions for the growing family, but this room remained much as it had been that November evening. 25 years, Quinton said, taking both her hands in his. It has gone by so fast, yet I can remember every detail of the day I found you. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago, Adelaide said, and sometimes it feels like yesterday. I meant what I said in my vows, Quinton told her, that I would spend my life making sure you never regretted choosing me. Do you regret it, I mean? Adelaide laughed and reached up to cup his weathered face in her hands. Not for one single second. You have given me a life beyond anything I could have imagined, a home, a family, a partnership built on love and respect. You saw me at my most vulnerable, and you did not take advantage. You healed me, protected me, and then you stood beside me as an equal partner in building something beautiful. You healed me too, Quinton said quietly. I did not even realize how wounded I was until you showed me what it meant to truly live, to truly love. You saved me just as much as I saved you that day. They stood together in the empty room, surrounded by the echoes of 25 years of memories, and kissed with the same passion and tenderness they had shared as newlyweds. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows. Quinton and Adelaide watched their children marry and have children of their own. They celebrated births and mourned losses. They saw Leavenworth transform from a frontier town into a thriving city. Through it all, they remained devoted to each other. Even as age slowed their steps and dimmed their sight, they still took walks together, still sat by the fire talking, still looked at each other with love. In the spring of 1910, as Quinton sat on the porch of their home with Adelaide beside him, watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard, he felt a deep sense of contentment. "We built a good life," he said. "We did," Adelaide agreed, her hand in his. From a chance meeting in the wilderness to this 4 children, 12 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren so far, all because you stopped to help a wounded stranger. "Not a stranger," Quinton corrected gently. "The moment I saw you, some part of me recognized you. I just did not know it yet." "Do you believe in fate?" Adelaide asked. "I believe that everything in my life led me to that canyon on that day at that moment," Quinton said. "Whether that is fate or chance or divine intervention, I do not know, but I am grateful for it every single day." Adelaide leaned her head on his shoulder, a gesture as familiar and comfortable as breathing. "I love you, Quinton O'Brien. I love you, Adelaide O'Brien, today and always." They sat together as the sun set over the Kansas plains, 2 people who had found each other in the wilderness and built a love that had lasted a lifetime. The mountain man and the wounded woman whose chance meeting had transformed both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. Around them, their family laughed and played, the legacy of a love that had started with a simple act of compassion and grown into something extraordinary. And as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Quinton and Adelaide sat hand in hand, grateful for every moment of the beautiful life they had built together. Years later, long after both Quinton and Adelaide had passed peacefully in their sleep within months of each other, their descendants would gather and tell the story of how it all began. They would speak of the mountain man who found a wounded woman trying to bandage her own wounds, who became her healer and her protector and eventually her partner in all things. They would tell of a love that had withstood every challenge, a partnership built on mutual respect and deep affection. And in the telling, The story would live on a reminder that sometimes the most profound changes in our lives come from the simplest acts of kindness, and that true love, once found, can transform not just two lives but generations to come. The O'Brien family mercantile still stood on Main Street in Leavenworth, now run by the fourth generation of Quintons and Adelaides and Samuels and Roses. The original building had been preserved as much as possible, including the office where Quinton and Adelaide had worked side by side for so many years. On the wall hung a framed photograph from their 50th wedding anniversary, one of the few photographs they had ever allowed to be taken. In it, Quinton stood tall despite his advanced age, his arm around Adelaide, who leaned into him with a smile. Their eyes, even captured in the grainy black and white image, shone with unmistakable love. Below the photograph was a brass plaque that read, "Quinton and Adelaide O'Brien, founders." Their love built not just a business, but a legacy. It was a legacy of compassion, courage, and commitment. A legacy that had started with blood-soaked bandages and gentle hands, with fear transformed into trust, with two wounded souls finding healing in each other. The mountain man had become her protector, and she had become his purpose. Together, they had built something that would endure long after they were gone, a family, a business, a community of love that spread outward in ever-widening circles. And it had all started with a simple choice to stop, to help, to care for a stranger in need. That choice had changed everything, proving that sometimes the most ordinary moments hold the seeds of extraordinary futures. In the mountains outside Leavenworth, if you knew where to look, you could still find the boulder where Adelaide had hidden, where Quinton had found her. Over the years, it had become something of a landmark for the O'Brien family. Young couples would hike out to it, standing where their ancestors had first met, marveling at the chain of events that had led to their own existence. The land itself seemed to remember, the trees standing silent witness to a love story that had unfolded in their shade. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew just right, you could almost hear the echoes of that first meeting, the sound of tearing cloth as bandages were prepared, the gentle murmur of a deep voice offering help, the tentative trust being offered and accepted. It was there that the story had truly begun, in blood and pain and desperate hope. But it had transformed into something beautiful, something lasting, something that proved love could flourish even in the harshest circumstances when two hearts were willing to take the risk. The mountain man and his Adelaide were gone now, laid to rest side by side in the cemetery overlooking the Missouri River. But their love lived on in every descendant who inherited Quinton's strength or Adelaide's determination, in every act of kindness performed in their memory, in every story told about how it all began. And perhaps that is the greatest legacy of all, not the material things left behind, but the love that continues to ripple outward, touching lives in ways both seen and unseen, reminding each new generation that true love is worth fighting for, worth building upon, worth cherishing for all the days we are given. From a chance encounter in the wilderness to a lifetime of devotion, from two individuals to a sprawling family tree, from that first hesitant act of trust to 5 decades of unwavering partnership, this was the story of Quinton and Adelaide O'Brien. A mountain man and a wounded woman who found in each other not just survival, but a reason to truly live. Their story was one of healing, not just of physical wounds, but of emotional ones as well. Quinton had healed Adelaide's shoulder, but she had healed his lonely heart. He had protected her from danger, but she had protected him from a life of isolation. Together, they had created something neither could have achieved alone, and in the end, that is what love does. It heals, it protects, it transforms. It takes two separate stories and weaves them into one, creating something stronger and more beautiful than either could be alone. The Wild West was full of stories, tales of outlaws and lawmen, of gold strikes and land rushes, of hardship and triumph. But among all those stories, the tale of Quinton and Adelaide O'Brien stood out as something special. Not because it was dramatic or sensational, but because it was real. It was a love story that proved that sometimes the greatest adventures are not found in seeking fortune or fame, but in opening your heart to another person and building a life together one day at a time. As the 20th century unfolded and the Wild West became memory and legend, the O'Brien family continued to thrive. They faced new challenges: economic depressions, world wars, technological changes that would have seemed like magic to Quinton and Adelaide. But through it all, they held on to the values their ancestors had established: compassion for those in need, courage in the face of adversity, commitment to family and community, and above all, the transformative power of love. And whenever doubt crept in, whenever times got hard, the O'Briens would remember the story of their beginning. They would think of a mountain man who chose to stop and help rather than pass by, of a wounded woman who chose to trust rather than fear, and of the beautiful life those two choices had created. That story, told and retold through generations, became more than just family history. It became a reminder that our choices matter, that kindness has power, that love can flourish in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the person we help is actually helping us just as much. In the end, Quinton had been right all those years ago when he told Adelaide that hope was worth holding on to until you knew otherwise. They had held on to hope in each other, in their love, in the future they were building, and that hope had been rewarded beyond their wildest dreams. The mountain man found her bandaging her own wounds, and he became her healer and her protector from that day forward. But the story did not end there. It was just the beginning of something far greater: a love that would last a lifetime and echo through generations, a partnership that would build not just a family, but a legacy, a simple act of compassion that would change countless lives. And so the story of Quinton and Adelaide O'Brien lived on, a testament to the enduring power of love, the importance of compassion, and the beautiful truth that sometimes the best things in life come from simply choosing to care for another human being in their moment of need. Their love story had been written in the Wild West, in a time of danger and uncertainty, of vast frontiers and new beginnings. But the themes were timeless: love, courage, trust, partnership, devotion. These things never go out of style, never lose their power, never cease to inspire. From that fateful day in September 1873 to their final days together in the early 20th century, Quinton and Adelaide O'Brien lived a love story for the ages. Not because it was perfect, no love story ever is, but because it was real, hard-won, and built to last. The mountain man and the wounded woman, the healer and the protected, the partners who built an empire of love that would endure long after they were gone. This was their story, and it was beautiful,